Today we're at the Belfry to meet up with Titleist, and we're going to be running through their extensive driver range. Now there's 4 models this year running from the TSI 1 to the TSI 4. We're going to be checking out the differences and seeing just how each one performs, so we can find out which one will be right for your game. So we're here in the Titleist fitting bay at the Belfry, and we're just going to run through all 4 driver models and see what the differences are in terms of data. It'll particularly be interesting to look at the carry distances, the spin and also the height. So some of the data was definitely pretty interesting there. My longest drive on average was 232 yards, and that was actually with the TSI 4, which I definitely wasn't expecting because typically low spin models don't suit me. Now, although this was the longest, you could see the ball flight was a bit lower and was kind of dropping about the air because the spin was down at like 2000, which probably isn't ideal. If we move to the opposite extreme, in the TSI 1, this was launching so high, literally over 100 feet. But the spin was very high too, nearly at the 3000s. So although this was easy to hit and easy to launch, it definitely probably wouldn't be that easy to control in the wind. In terms of the 2 and the 3, this was where it got interesting because I played in the TS2 before and I wasn't sure which model I was going to go into. The TSI 3 actually turned out to be the longest, which definitely surprised me because it's got a smaller, more compact head, and I thought it might be a bit more difficult to hit. It averaged at 229 compared to 226 with the TSI 2, which isn't a massive difference, but it was actually the ball flight and the spin which was better with the 3. So this was averaging in the spin about 2,300 compared to 2,600 in the 2, which was probably a little bit high. And this was reflected in the ball flight. The 3 was just slightly more penetrating and kept going for a little bit longer. But let's head out on the course and see how they compare when they're out in play. So we've been on the range and got data with all 4 models, but now it's time to bring it out to the course on the 10th here at the Belfry. And I really want to look at the changes in ball flight between the 4, but also if it changes my shot shape, and crucially look at the distance we get with each model. Now I've got the tensile blue shaft that I was fit into in both the 2, 3 and the 4 models, so that's really consistent. But then in the 1, this club head is lighter, and we know that, but it's not really designed to go with that shaft. It would affect the swim working and the balance. So we've got a slightly different lighter shaft in this, and that's just going to be more representative of how this head is designed to work. So let's go ahead and hit this first. This is obviously the lightest in the range. It's typically designed for people with slightly slower swing speeds, but it's going to be really interesting to see how it performs for me. Definitely flown very high, but incredibly straight. It still felt really stable, but you could see how this would really work for someone who struggles to launch the ball, because I got some exceptional height on that. Now we're straight into the wind here, and I might have expected that to move the ball flight a bit because of the height, but it actually stayed super straight, which I'm really impressed with. Right, let's go up and hit the 2 now and see what the differences are. So in terms of styling over the ball, these are all very similar. But you can see with this, the head is a little bit more elongated, and that's because we've got more weight in the back here, and that's all for that MOI and stability. Now I already hit the ball pretty high, so we still had a pretty high launch on that, but I would say at the initial start you could definitely see that it was more penetrating and a little bit lower. But for me, this still felt super stable, and I had like a nice little draw shape, which is definitely what I typically like to see with driver. Now we're going to move into the 3 model, which is actually the one I got fit for. So it's going to be interesting to see if we see a jump up in speed or not, and a bit more distance. This is a slightly smaller club head as well, so there's definitely a little visual difference. So straight away you can see this is a lot smaller compact head, and the toe is also a little bit more rounded and to me looks a bit smaller, and I really love the visual of that. It just makes me feel like I can hit it a bit more, which on the range saw a bit more distance, but out in this wind we're going to see if that actually happens here. So yeah, we definitely saw a slightly more penetrating flight there, which for me is good because I can't really get the ball going up high in the air. It also felt a little bit quicker off the face, but we're going to have to see if it's gone any further when we get down there. So the final model in the lineup is the 4. This is the smallest, and it's also the lowest spinning head. Not typically what I would use, so it's really going to be interesting to see how it affects the ball flight. So I could definitely see that was traveling a bit lower, but for me, because I don't quite generate enough spin to use this, you could also see it wanting to dip a little bit in the air. So there's definitely a spot in this for someone's bag who's really high spin or a really fast swing speed player, but for me it is spinning probably a little bit too low. So this is the first golf ball we've got to, and this is the one I hit with the TSI 4. So although I was really happy with the direction of this, it went very straight. It was definitely a little bit low and dippy and it didn't quite have enough spin on it for me. But to be honest, I've still got a pretty decent chance at up and down for birdie, so I'll still be pretty happy with this. Anyway, if we move up here, you can see the ones that I hit with the 3 and 2. And actually both of these came out fairly similar in terms of distance. The 2 was a bit further left though, so that's ended up in the bunker. This might have got a bit more room with the 3, but I have gone into the kind of edge of the semi-rough there. Now for me, in terms of ball fly, the 3 was the better of the 2, and it also was a little bit straighter. Now, if you're wondering where I hit the 1, I think it's in that bush somewhere. Honestly, it was so lightweight and I struck it so good, it actually went really far. But I do think in terms of dispersion, for me it would be quite hard to control that lighter club all the time, just because of timing, and it was a little bit too whippy. But in terms of distance, it was really good. So that was definitely really interesting. And to be honest, the performance was just so strong across all 4 models. Really, I could have almost put any of these in play. But there were a few noticeable differences that made one the standout performer. In terms of the TSI 1, it felt so easy to hit, it launched really high, and it did go a pretty good distance too, but I could definitely feel, because the shaft is a bit softer flex at the bottom, that I did have a bit of a tendency to hit it a little bit left. So something slightly stronger in the 2 and 3 definitely suited me the best. It was interesting because the 3 is meant to be slightly less forgiving, it's a smaller head and more compact, and you might think that might make it a bit harder to hit, but I actually hit this the best in terms of dispersion, and I was really impressed with the distance out of this. The fly was pretty similar in terms of the 2, but for me I just felt like I could move it through the air a little bit quicker. But in terms of that kind of mid-launch that most people are going to want with that typical kind of mid club head speed, these are definitely going to suit a lot of golfers. So at each end of the spectrum with the 1 and the 4, although the distance was pretty good, the flight just wasn't quite where I would want it, and the same with the spin being a bit too high in the 1 and a bit too low in the 4. Overall, I ended up going into the TSI 3 model, which I definitely loved, and I really liked the visual of that small head too, but it was really interesting to see just how that changed throughout the range. You definitely got kind of less spin as we moved from the 1 through to the 2, 3 and 4, and also a little bit lower launch in height. So definitely something for everyone across there. Right, that's all for today. If you have any questions about any of the drivers in this range, feel free to put them in the comments below or drop me a line on Twitter or Instagram. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications too. And if you're after more golf content, head to the National Club Golfer social media channels for more.